coffee.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. We're going to get started. Our first meeting this morning is our Sunny May Mortgage Insurance Committee meeting. And so thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. And I'm going to turn it right over to Lauren, who's going to get us started.
I note that Todd Sherman, representing Robert Mujica, Director of the Division of the Budget, is participating in the meeting via video conference from the New York State Division of the Budget Conference Center at the Capitol Building, room 131 in Albany. You hear us?
Yes, good morning.
Request a motion and a second to call to order the March 8, 2018 meeting of the Sunny May Mortgage Insurance Committee.
So moved.
Okay. The motion and second recorded will be used for all action items before the committee unless specific items call for a different vote or unless any committee member wishes to record his or her vote differently. The minutes of the meeting of the Mortgage Insurance Committee held on January 25, 2018 will be deemed approved absent corrections from the directors. And it's over to the chair.
Is it back to me, really?
It is. It is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
So here's the, I have something really important to say. The meeting will move to the Mortgage Insurance Committee program action items. So here we go. Thank you, Lauren, for teeing that up. Item 2 is a resolution recommending approval of 100% mortgage insurance on a $7,725,000 Wells Fargo permanent first mortgage loan for Debevoise Senior Housing, which is in Brooklyn, Kings County. And Mike is going to review this for us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This project comprises the construction of 65 all low-income units for seniors, of which 18 will be reserved for formerly homeless tenants. There's a project-based Section 8 HAP contract covering all of the units. And in addition to the insured first mortgage, there's a $6.5 million HPD subsidy loan, $11.9 million in federal low-income housing tax credits, and the project will receive a 420C real estate tax abatement. It's being developed by the Archer companies, experienced and well-regarded developers of low-income and supportive housing. This will be the 9th loan that we've insured for entities controlled by the Archers, with total exposure of $100 million. The insured loan amount is $119,000 per unit, which equals 28% of the project's total development cost of $431,000 per unit. And the project would break even with a pro forma 12% vacancy and collection loss or an 18% increase in operating expenses.
Good, thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike on this project? Lauren, do you want to, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
John?
I'm trying to keep it to a minimum, but I do want just one personal question. How do we know that the tenants in the future will have incomes at or below the limits required?
There'll be a regulatory agreement between the Archers and HPD. And then the Archers generally have to comport with the provisions of the code. And HPD will do annual reviews. And if the lender were HFA, we would do the same thing.
Right.
The HAP contracts also help government,
Yes.
don't they?
But generally, HUD designates the review to a local housing authority
Right.
or a finance agency.
Thanks.
So the income of the tenants is reviewed on an annual basis,
Annual,
right?
yes.
Right, good. Thanks, John. Good question. Any other questions for Mike on the project? Lauren?
Then the resolution before the Mortgage Insurance Committee is recommending approval of mortgage insurance and a commitment for the provision thereof for Debevoise Senior Housing, 40 Debevoise Street, Brooklyn, Kings County. Assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is carried.
Item 3 is a resolution approving 100% mortgage insurance on a $4 million CPC permanent first mortgage loan for West End Lofts, which is in Beacon, Dutchess County. Mike?
This project comprises the development of 73 low and mod-income units. 50% of the units, which are restricted to tenants earning between 50 and 60% of the Dutchess County AMI, will have a preference for artists. And the remaining 22 workforce units will be restricted to tenants earning between 75 and 100% of the Dutchess County AMI. In addition to the insured first mortgage, there's a $3 million HCR middle income program loan a $250,000 Dutchess County Home Fund grant, $13.4 million in federal and state low-income housing tax credits from DHCR, and a pilot agreement with the city of Beacon. The project is being developed by Sean and Ken Kearney, who are likewise experienced developers of affordable and supportive housing in the Hudson Valley. And this will be the 10th loan we've insured for entities controlled by the Kearneys, with total exposure of $37.5 million. The insured loan amount is $55,000 per unit, which equals 19% of the project's total development cost of $287,000 per unit. So this is an efficient project. The project would break even with an 11% pro forma vacancy rate or a 10% increase in operating expenses.
Mike, thank you. Any questions for Mike on this project in Beacon?
Similar, simple
Sure.
question.
Please, Jonathan.
Just a two-part quick question. How do you know that there are artists in the 50 units? And what does it mean by workforce?
Workforce means that it's above low income. So it's greater than 50%, 60% of AMI, which is the requirement of the code. But they are generally below 100, 120% of AMI. So they're affordable, but they're not low income.
But they don't have to work for government?
They
or
do not.
not
They do
private?
not. Although presumably some of them will, but they do not.
It's a little bit of an art, not science.
We don't want them to
right?
be
It's sort of like above low income, but
But
not
not-
market.
They're not starving artists. We hope. Mike, I'll put to Jonathan's other question. How do you know they're artists? That's a great question.
Once again, in this case, there'll be a regulatory agreement between DHCR and the Kearneys, and they will be required to obtain documentation of the tenants, the source of their income. So they have to be working artists.
Thank you.
But it's a preference, it's not a stiff requirement, is that right?
Yeah, yes, if they absolutely can't find them, they can rent it to someone else.
I know there's been some controversy about that in some other projects, one on Long Island, Copeg, I think.
Yeah, it hits up a little bit against fair housing to require
Right.
artists are not a
A protected
class.
class.
Well, and who's an artist after all, right?
Right. If you have to make a living, where do you?
How do you demonstrate that? But I'm sure folks are familiar with Beacon, and this is just a couple blocks from Main Street in downtown Beacon. A very important kind of small city revitalization project,
Yeah.
really. It's not part of that initiative, I know, but also this is a stone's throw from Dia Beacon, right? And because of Dia Beacon, many years on now, converted, what was it, Nabisco, or it was old
It was a Nabisco box factory.
Right, box factory. Which is just the most incredible museum, and really a great cultural gem in the Hudson Valley. That really has given Beacon itself kind of a direction or a flavor, right? As a place for artists. And so
Yeah.
this is nicely kind of woven into that redevelopment of Beacon as an art center.
Yeah, and Dutchess County has been very proactive. They have a shop steading program where if you live upstairs and have a business downstairs, they provide very substantial second mortgages.
Right.
And we insure probably 20 CPC first mortgages on all of these little, essentially townhouses on Main Street.
Right, right. Well, it's led to some nice new retail shops and restaurants on Main Street, right, in some of the storefronts. Any other questions, observations for Mike on the project?
We insure most
Most of those? I
Yeah,
bet you.
we do.
Next time I go to Beacon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lauren, back to you.
The resolution before the Mortgage Insurance Committee is approving mortgage insurance and a commitment for the provision thereof for West End Lofts, 1117 to 1163 Wolcott Avenue, Beacon, Dutchess County. Assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is carried.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks, everybody, for that one. Next is a resolution approving 100% mortgage insurance on a $2,31,178 CPC permanent first mortgage loan for 476-80 South Salina Street, which is in downtown Syracuse in Onondaga County. Mike, back to you.
You wonder how they arrived at this loan amount.
Yeah. Maybe, that'll be Jonathan's question.
Right. This project comprises the historic readaptation of a former commercial building on Salina Street and in downtown Syracuse, and pretty much in the CBD in Syracuse.
Yep.
The project will provide 26 workforce housing units and 16,000 square feet of commercial space. Although there's no regulatory agreement, rents are projected to be affordable at 75% of the AMI. And in addition to the insured first mortgage, there's a $338,000 City of Syracuse grant, $200,000 Empire State Development grant, $200,000 National Grid Brownfield Program grant. The insured loan amount is only $78,000 per unit, which equals 64% of the project's total development cost of $123,000 per unit. And the project would break even with a pro forma 29% residential vacancy rate or a 43% increase in operating expenses. The project would also break even with 80% of the commercial space vacant. And there's $426,000 or 13% developer equity in the project.
Mike, I have a question. This is the former Goldberg Furniture Store, right? So it was basically retail. How is it also a brownfield site? Or, you know what I mean? What's the brownfield cleanup contribution for?
I don't know.
Okay. Not a critical issue. It's interesting, right, to see that
Yeah.
it's really good actually to see National Grid
Yeah.
putting money. Now, folks will recall that the office of Niagara Mohawk is but a few blocks from the site, the former Niagara Mohawk, which was subsumed by National Grid. So the Syracuse is the home base. But just curious that they're putting $200,000 of brownfield cleanup money in to what was a retail. Somebody knows why. Other questions, comments? Jonathan, seriously, you've got something on this?
No, I don't want to be too predictive.
I want you to answer the
Right.
question. I learned from the answers to your question, so please.
I have a question. The margins are a bit lopsided compared to other applications.
It's,
Does that imply, profitability? Or?
I think because, unlike the heavily subsidized income-restricted projects where the developer takes a fee out, in this case, the developers are putting in over $400,000 in equity. And if their return on equity is adequate, but it's not. I think it's not unreasonable because I think they're at risk for $400,000, which is very different from the previous two projects.
It's you might have mentioned it, Mike, but I'm seeing in the notes that they got the land from the Syracuse, the land bank, which
Yes.
very interesting to see, and we hope to see more of that,
Yeah.
right? This is you don't hear much about the land bank program in the city, of course, in New York, but upstate, the land bank.
In Syracuse, it's quite
In
big.
Syracuse is quite big, right?
It's growing in Suffolk County too on the ground.
Okay.
Ruth Ann, managed by, it's the city of Syracuse was the applicant? Is it the city? It's city?
For the land,
Yeah.
the land bank?
Yeah. I think so, right?
I think so, or it's like an independent, right, the land banks are sort of
Probably a
quasi-independent. It's
yeah.
not
A not-for-profit,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Probably
Right,
with
and
the
the,
approval
and
of
the city,
Made by
I'm gonna try to
representation.
So the
make,
city would give the property to
right,
the
I'll make
land
this
bank.
up and you can help me, but these land banks were set up so that when there was basically vacant and abandoned property that a jurisdiction might have in foreclosure, it could turn it over to a not-for-profit and they could bank it, right? Get it off, right, and seek developers for it, seek partners. But anyway, so they got the site for $5,000 for the land bank. That just sounds like a good place to start a project like this,
Right.
an abandoned building in downtown Syracuse, right on a major street.
Yeah,
Great, so that's just a nice sort of beginning of this project. Question, yeah,
Is
please.
there a regulatory agreement with this type of project?
There is not. There is not. So the projected rents are just projected rents. There's no regulatory agreement.
Questions or, that the city is putting $300,000 into the project, presumably we're sort of following that lead too on the
Yeah.
value of the project as a community redevelopment project, and that the city will care that there's a level of affordability?
Yeah, and the way the MIF sort of looks at them, right, is that they have sort of a public purpose. So it's not market rate housing, it is housing that is a brownfield, that's a land bank sponsored project, so it's redeveloping a vacant site. So it has these other sort of public
So downtown
outcomes
revitalization.
and has ESD funds in it.
Downtown
has-
revitalization.
Right, so that's sort of the lens through which Mike and his team looks at projects like this that don't actually have a regulatory agreement, but they're sort of achieving other redevelopment public purposes. And as demonstrated also by the city and other folks putting money in.
Make something happen where it otherwise wouldn't.
Right, and there's a 485A tax exemption, which is an as-of-right exemption for the redevelopment of downtown properties into mixed-use properties with residential and ground floor commercial.
Thank you.
And that's
There's
Also
a,
critical.
yeah, and again, this is not, the site isn't far from 81, you know, the elevated highway that unfortunately, right, since the 1960s has bisected the city of Syracuse and causes a fair amount of, or has, blight on both sides of the elevated highways. And it's a big Syracuse project talked about for years about what to do. Should, you know, there have been plans to put it at grade. If there was money, could you make a tunnel? But there's a real need for these projects to bring people back to downtown Syracuse to live there in these revitalized buildings. It's a lot, you could check a lot of kind of public purpose objectives of a project like this, even if there's not a regulatory framework for affordability long term. It's an important revitalization project.
It's very helpful. That's where I was headed. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? If not, Lauren, let's do the honors.
The resolution before the Mortgage Insurance Committee is approving mortgage insurance and a commitment for the provision thereof for 476 to 480 South Salina Street, Syracuse, Onondaga County. Assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is carried.
Item 5 is a resolution approving a $650,000 increase in mortgage insurance to $6 million, or $6,550,000. So from $6 million, obviously adding 600. No, from was the original amount. We're adding $650,000 to an insured amount of $5,900,000. It looks like, right?
Yep.
On an HFA permanent first mortgage loan for 3500 Park Avenue in the Bronx. Mike, back to you.
This loan was originally approved at the January 25th, 2018 meeting of the Sunny May Board, and subsequent to the meeting, HPD reduced its subsidy loan by $1.174 million. There were some offsetting increases. Federal low-income housing taxes increased by $479,000. The deferred developer fee increased by $476,000. However, total development costs also went up by $575,000, most of which was an increase in hard costs. And this necessitated an increase in loan amount of $650,000. To offset the reduction in the HPD second mortgage, HPD awarded a project-based Section 8 HAP contract covering 8 of the units in the project. And this contract, the difference between the fair market rents and the tax credit rents, generates an additional $51,000 in revenue. And so the project's income to expense ratio remains at 105.
Thanks, Mike. All right, questions on this for Mike? I have one which is, and if you explained it and I didn't get it, pardon me, but what caused HPD to reduce its subsidy? Can we guess? Or we shouldn't guess and...
Well, they had they had increase in other sources, so it allowed them to take their sources down, right? So Mike was saying they got a higher tax credit raise.
Yep,
And
got more tax
they-
credits,
More deferred developer.
more units
And they got
under,
8, project-based Section 8.
right.
Rents.
Construction costs.
But their construction costs went up.
Most of it was an increase in construction.
And we probably talked about it in January, but tell us a little bit about the bridge. Isn't the bridge the...
Sure, it's actually a well-known and fairly prolific provider of supportive and mental health services.
Right, right.
And a number of supportive units throughout the city.
Right, it sounded, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mike on this? Increase in insurance? All right, right, Lauren, back to you.
The resolution before the Mortgage Insurance Committee is approving modifications to mortgage insurance and a commitment for the provision thereof for 3900 Park Avenue, Bronx County. Assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is carried.
Item 6 is an informational item from Mike.
Just the mortgage recording tax in February was 14.5 million, which is greater than it was in the same month in either 17 or 16. But within this fiscal year, the mortgage recording tax seems to alternate between 12 and 14 million a month. There's really been no discernible trend within the year. However, for the first 11 months of the year, it's 146 million as compared with 161 million last year and 172 million 2 years ago. So the overall trend is downward.
And just again, in case, I mean, I like being reminded, but because Jonathan is new to the committee, could you remind us of the importance of the connection between the MRT collections and our work?
We receive the monthly mortgage recording tax from all 62 counties that's held in an account that's not a mortgage reserve account. It's essentially a payable to the state of New York unless those monies are used as reserves for new commitments or new claims. And so we need an adequate amount of mortgage recording surtax to provide reserves for new commitments and new claims. And this is an adequate amount. And as of March 31st, anything remaining in that account in excess of what we've needed for new reserves and operating expenses reverts to the state. Although
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I would say, by statute, anything left in the account on March 31st is payable to New York State. Although in the past 5 years, the executive budget has designated it for affordable housing subsidy.
What happened during the recession or when the MRT really
it-
dipped?
There was no excess for housing subsidy. And only in 1 year, I think probably 12, we actually had to cut back on originations of new commitments because we, essentially ran out of money after 11 months.
Thank you.
It comes from all 62 counties, right?
Mhm.
And it's 100% of,
It-
at a
it's
closing when someone pays MRT,
100%,
100%?
except, it's 100% in 49 of the 62 counties. And in 13 of the counties, the 12 counties in the MTA region,
Right.
plus Erie County, the single-family mortgage recording tax is diverted to the MTA and the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority. But the MIF gets the mortgage recording tax other than single-family. So in New York City, for example, it's the apartment buildings, office buildings, hotels,
Right. But not
but
one
not
to
single
four.
family. The MTA gets around 8 million a month.
MTA has a myriad of taxes and,
Yeah.
but I know that when it dips, there is concern, but it has other taxes and ways
The payroll
to get
tax.
revenue.
The lovely MTA payroll
Yeah,
tax, which
all
our
sorts
HR
of-
department has to grapple with, yeah. Okay, good, thanks, Mike. Lauren,
Well-
back to you, gonna close up?
Okay, then, if there's no further business, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the meeting is adjourned.
Great, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Probably soon see you again.